Joining us is her attorney, legal titan, Harmeet Dhillon. She's joining us via Skype, and you know Harmeet, you've seen her everywhere, and she takes all these tough cases. Harmeet, it's so good to have you. This case is insane to me because I got to tell you, honestly, if I was in the women's locker room, first off, that's a very vulnerable time. You know, women, you're undressing, you're taking a shower after, swimming, working out. I hear a man's voice. I look outside and see him watching two little girls with whom he apparently has zero familial relationship with, getting ready to use the restroom. I would also wonder if I'm not witnessing a crime underway. That was her initial reaction. That seems perfectly reasonable, but the YMCA said no.
Absolutely. Well, we're seeing a rash of this type of incident, Dana, and it's really troubling because we women, like you said, first of all, we are trained to protect ourselves. But secondly, we're trained to look out for others. And many women who are professionals in a field, including teaching or the healthcare field, we're actually under our duty to report this type of incident happening to vulnerable girls. And so when this woman who did the exact right thing is being penalized without due process, this is a real problem because, first of all, this pool is on the property of the city of Port Townsend in Washington State, a beautiful location, and she's used it for 40 years. It's currently leased out to the YMCA, Young Men's Christian Association. And so you cannot deprive somebody of their property right and property taxpayer to use public property without due process. So the Y has a problem. The city of Port Townsend has a problem. And frankly, this policy is problematic. And in response to our clients' outrage over this incident and the whole back and forth with management over there, they said, well, of course you should have known that we're letting men into the women's locker rooms now because we're flying a pride flag in the lobby. And that's supposed to be some kind of a legal notice. No, actually, I think a lot of gay people would agree that this type of an encounter is really problematic. And so the rules keep changing, Dana, and in any event, the constitutional rules haven't changed. And Julie can't be deprived of her rights without due process. So we're looking forward to the Y and the city's response. And if it's not satisfactory, we will sue them.
That's a great point, too, about the property and who's leasing it and who it's owned by. I mean, she is a taxpayer, talking with Harmeet Dhillon, who's joining us via Skype. And the flag, too, you're right, that's not a legal notice. And I was always told by the left, this is what we've heard from the trans activists, that it's not an indication of whom you're attracted to, but how you identify. So that doesn't necessarily mean that a guy who wants to identify as a woman is still not attracted to women, which creates a problem in the women's locker room that apparently they just didn't pay attention to with this whole thing. Because the way that I understood it, it was just the basic pride flag, and it didn't have the trans, I think, triangle and all of that on it.
Well, even if it did, Julie's 82 years old. Yeah. I'm, of a certain age. So are you. Like, how are we supposed to figure out what these flags mean? And do they mean there are going to be men with penises in our women's spaces? This is completely inappropriate. It's inappropriate. And, no amount of notice or a signage would make this appropriate, Mike.
And what floors me, and this is what I don't understand, Harmeet, if a man who wants to identify as a woman feels uncomfortable in the men's locker room and he wants to use the women's locker room, he's accommodated. He feels uncomfortable. He feels unsafe. We'll let him access the women's locker room. But if a woman feels uncomfortable and unsafe because a man is in the women's locker room, she's called a bigot. I mean, that seems like accommodation of one over the other. And in the scenario that the context that you just put out there with the taxpayer-funded facility, that's a no-go.
Absolutely. So we really need the courts to clarify these situations. And we are seeing it in so many different contexts, Dana. We're seeing it in women's sports. We're seeing it in women's athletics in the collegiate level, which is protected by Title IX. And so currently all the rights that the feminists, who are themselves Julie's age, fought for have been taken away in the space of a handful of years, to the point where women are the ones who are being asked to feel uncomfortable everywhere we go. And we're the ones who are physically vulnerable. We're typically smaller in size than men. We're less strong than men. And I don't think, for one, as a woman who's fought for my rights in the workplace and in society, that I need to stand for it. Neither does Julie. So we're really proud to stand up for her. And we need to have the court step in and put an end to this and give back women their protected spaces.
We're talking about the story of 82-year-old Julie Jamin, who was kicked out of the YMCA band after using a pool for 40 years because she called out a man who was in the women's locker room. Harmeet, women are told. And I was trying to remember. I think I've grown up with this. I don't know when I first was told to listen to my gut instinct. If you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in a situation, seek help or try to remove yourself from the situation. Women are told, these are things that you need to look out for. If you feel uncomfortable, you see a strange man you don't know walking down the street towards you, maybe cross the street, go to the other, the opposite sidewalk. I mean, we're told these things because there are certain statistics that justify the need for that concern. What does this sort of behavior, this shaming of women who are relying on that gut instinct that we've been brought up with for generations, what does that do to women and our self-preservation when we're shamed for relying on those instincts?
Well, first of all, younger women who don't have the same training that we do and are being told that this is perfectly normal are going to be at higher risk of sexual assault. That's a fact. They're going to be at higher risk of physical injury in the sports context. That's a biological fact. This confusion is really a one-way ratchet. It's in favor of men and it's against women. And every woman needs to stand up and shout about this because our rights are being eroded and our safety is being eroded. I mean, to the point where women who might have passed a bad check or done something wrong in their private lives and got convicted of a crime, the federal prisons are mandating that women be housed with men who are identifying as women, even if all of their physical organs are intact and they're going through quote unquote transition process at my taxpayer expense. This is leading to sexual assaults of women prisoners. And so I view this as a five-alarm fire. This is an epidemic in women's safety and women's rights. And, regardless of your political orientation, and I'm glad to see women, at least women sports leaders, Navratilova and others, some women feminists, are standing up and calling this what it is, but they need to be joined by the rest of them. And this seems like a conspiracy yet again of men trying to take away women's prerogatives and rights. And we should not stand.
That's a great point. I mean, it's the ultimate victory of the progressive patriarchy, and somehow they've gotten some of these third wave feminists to go along with it and accommodate it. We're going to watch this case and see how this unfolds. I'm so glad that you're on it because I feel confident that it will be resolved favorably and in favor of women with you handling this. Harmeet Dhillon, always appreciate your fight, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me,
Of
Dana.
course.